Hello Edible Acres friends. It has been quite a while. I'm trying to get back on track with making some videos here, and I thought one way to do so is after a cup of coffee in the morning, but before we get started into the day's work, to take a meandering wander through our backyard garden here at the half-acre site where Sasha and I live near Ithaca, New York, and just get folks caught up on what's going on in here, look at some of the wild and hopefully wonderful chaos of this scene. So hope that is enjoyable for you. The first thing I want to say though is I really appreciate folks being patient around way less videos lately. We love making videos and sharing them, but first and foremost we are doing the work that we do in the world as far as growing perennial plants for our nursery and lots of food for our needs and the wild friends' needs. And this time of year can be just so busy. I'm sure a lot of you that are deep into the world of growing things where you live can understand what we're saying here. But it feels very important to share ideas with folks. We get lots of great feedback about where the value or what the value is from this channel. So getting back on track with it for sure. But you can see our garden here is pretty wild. It's vibrant and alive in wonderful ways. There's a lot happening, a lot that we are actively involved in curating and stewarding and making decisions on, and a lot that's just happening. One area that's definitely curated pretty nicely and I think is really beautiful is this miscanthus grass trellis Sasha made. She actually made this last year. These are from miscanthus stalks that we cut from our living wall in the front when they were dormant and dead. You need to cut them back, or you should cut them back each year, and just tied together with jute. So should be all biodegradable. And last year this supported tomatoes. This year so far it's supporting peas, and peas are having a really lovely time. They're starting to come into our meals every day almost. And even though it's not a very large amount of pea plants, it's so many peas to eat that we're going to start sharing them with others pretty soon. And just for fun, of course, random apple trees showed up last year, so we're leaving them to grow this year and maybe graft that next year and transplant them the year after. It's that long scale stuff. You kind of make decisions as you go whether or not a tree can stay for a little while, for not at all, or for forever. Speaking of forever, there's a sweet cherry tree that a bird must have pooped out the seed for. I'm gonna guess it's been about 5 or 6 years ago now. They've been growing beautifully. They've yet to make a single fruit. I wonder if they will, although you know what? I see one random one up in there. Remains to be seen whether or not this will produce anything that's for our direct benefit, but that's kind of fun to leave beings like that in the garden. There's a fruit forming, but neat to see. Probability is that a bird was sitting right here. I'm gonna guess they were facing that way when they pooped out a cherry seed that landed on the ground there. ... Here we are a bunch of years later, and we've got a big old random wild cherry taking up prime real estate in the garden. It could be pretty easy for folks to interpret that as maybe a foolish move, like why waste space for a random seedling cherry? But I think there's some real sweetness in having beings like that along with those who you are curating very intimately. Just to the south of that cherry, this is a pretty fun bed. It was a little bit of a playful move, but it actually seems pretty functional too. Last year we rooted dormant cuttings. This is a Seaberry female varietal called Trophy that we rooted last spring. I meant to dig them up this year and either sell them or move them along, but the timing ran out. And I noticed a few years ago that French tarragon, which is a beautiful perennial Artemisia culinary herb and a really interesting leaf just to eat fresh in the garden. Something similar vibe about the way tarragon grows and Seaberry grows. And so in a playful gesture, we put tarragon in and amongst the Seaberry. And so it's this really interesting visual pattern that happens between the Seaberry foliage and the tarragon foliage. But it actually seems compatible. The tarragon folds in between the Seaberry leaves and probably is enjoying the benefit of lots of extra fertility that the Seaberry offers. We'll probably have to dig all this out in the fall and move them along, maybe sell them, maybe share them, maybe move them to other beds. But Seaberry and tarragon, if only for the visual alliteration, is pretty fun. This monstrosity beautiful pile of leaves is elderberry. There's a couple sweet Sicily tucked in there. There's some really interesting, strange ornamental garlic that are absolutely getting choked out with the lack of light. But this whole pile is all one elderberry. It's a varietal called Ranch, which is a diminutive, beautiful foliage American elder. And this is about as tall as they'll ever get, 6-7 feet, very compact, very, very suckering and dense. And this once was a bed that had a few different characters really thriving, and now it's just become, for better or worse, but I think pretty nice, a really great propagation space. So if and when folks order ranch elderberry cuttings or plants from our website, chances are we're rooting around somewhere in here and trying to dig up suckers so that other diversity can happen. It's about a 6-foot wide circular bed that is somewhere in the middle in there. We've lost the pathway, and at some point a lupin showed up on the south side, and I think a groundhog maybe laid on there and crushed them over, but the lupin's wondering what they can possibly do in there. I think it's just so much competition from this elder. They are some powerful plants once they get going. We've got some beds with younger, earlier succession movements happening. This is a fun example of the intersection between what we're explicitly trying to do and what's just kind of wildly happening. The south end, the west end of this bed has some transplants. These are all Amelanchier or serviceberry seedlings that we had in a container outside over winter. Some random mustard, that's fine. Just on the far enough edge of the bed to get some light and have their needs met. These are some perennial kale seedlings. We talked about this in a past video. So these are saved seed that we started earlier in the season and planted out. And then dill showed up because dill was in this bed in the past. Very compatible to grow in and around, but we didn't seed that in this year. We just have been working around them, and Sasha will harvest the dill as needed when it puts competition against these plants who we're hoping to keep. Likewise, borage shows up because borage was here before, and we don't intervene very intensively around plants making their own seed, kind of choosing their own destiny. We'll pull them as needed and send them to the chickens, but we've got some young, long-term perennial nursery plants that'll grow here for a year or two, perennial herbaceous plants growing in here, wild, feral, self-sowing annuals, and then more perennial elements here are rooted goji berries. Again, very compatible with the dill to be in here. And we'll want to stool these throughout the season so they can root a little bit stronger. And we may need at that point to pull the dill and harvest it. But it's kind of nice wherever a bed can be filling in. You know, the goal is basically have as much vegetation in a bed as possible. Ideally, most of it is food and medicine and has value in the ways that we would like, but there's just intrinsic value in plants growing too. But we've got here, these were parsleys planted last year that overwintered. So again, we'll absolutely encourage them and support and be out of their way for the most part to let them make flower and seed, so we can continue on with this line of parsleys that seem like they're willing to naturalize in here. But yeah, sweet moments to see. It takes a bit more repetitive management to keep up with these sorts of things, but it works well for the bees, it works well for soil life. And if, 3 or 4 elements falter in this bed, there still will be some in here that are thriving. We've got a bed with our annual onions, a little weedy, but pretty healthy overall. More perennial kale. I'm trying to dotting them in through the garden in different areas just to see where they're happiest. We've got a whole number of apricots. We got different varieties of apricot seed from someone out in Zone 4, Idaho, and growing out all these different apricots in a couple different beds. In fact, we've got little baby apricots growing with chamomile and nigella on the edges in that bed. So maybe at some point we'll be offering apricots in earnest through the website. We'll have to see. More lupins doing their thing. They're starting to really get entrenched in this landscape in a pretty fun way. Oh, and here's one thing that's been very exciting for us this year. This is the first season. It starts to get pretty dense in here. Pardon me, plants. Honeyberry, we've been growing them for quite a while. We've been growing Russian varietals for the most part. tundra and borealis, really nice, good sturdy plants. A couple years ago we started investing in the Japanese types. So here's Boreal Beauty, and boy is it special to see. So these are Japanese honeysuckle family. These are Lonicera family plants. In fact, if you have Japanese honeysuckle existing in your landscape, these would look very familiar. Everything about them is very similar, except they make a fruit that tastes like a really tart, very complex, and I think lovely blueberry. And they make that fruit at the time of year that strawberries are just beginning. And these Japanese ones are huge and plump and very, very flavorful. We will be stool layering. You can see I added perlite and sand around the base of this plant. We've got around 12 varieties of these Japanese honeyberries that we're working with. And if we can stool layer them enough, so long as they're not patented types, we'll probably be offering them on the website, because this is pretty darn special. Pardon my nibble as I go. But you can see that all of this green growth is this year's growth. Incredibly happy with this site without modifying the soil to be more acidic, which is special for us. We can't really grow blueberries much at all. They barely hold on. They exist, but they barely hold on. But honeyberry seems to be explosive here and quite a lot of fun. Just the same pattern over and over again. Some elements we are just working around and letting be. This oxalis and random mustard that's here. Some that are more explicit. Sea kale root sections that we've intentionally put in here to grow for a season. So if you were to order sea kale from us, more likely than not we're digging them up hither and thither from random pockets that we have throughout the garden. And then in this case, we're taking a cultivar gooseberry and tip layering them. We pin them down with rocks and soil periodically so they can root, doing the same thing with goji berry. And then our good friend tarragon from before has another little thicket here. More elderberry just growing like mad. They're just starting to put on their serious flower nectar flow right now. So soon enough we'll be harvesting some flowers, and then shortly after that harvesting fruit. And hopefully we'll get some videos out there about the magic that Sasha does with those things. We have full intention of making more videos with Sasha. I hope folks understand. It's just that she really doesn't feel comfortable being in front of the camera. So trying to find that balance of responding to the desire that folks have to see more of her with her own feelings of not loving being in front of the camera. So bear with us as we figure that out. Anyway, lots more beds happening. These are the perennial leeks that we offer through the website. We will be allowing and being excited to see lots of them make flowers and then seed, so that next year we can grow way more from seed instead of cloning them. It's always a nicer pathway if we can to have seed grown plants instead of cloned. More serviceberry. We talked about those just a little ways ago. These are third-year plants grown from seed. In fact, they're starting to make fruit now. Ramped up the numbers on these just enough that I think this fall we might be able to offer these. These are Amelanchier alnifolia, so very short, very productive, very sweet, large fruited varietal called Smoky. So hopefully in the near future we'll be seeing serviceberry on the website. We may be offering elephant garlic seed and potato onions. We might be able to offer Schisandra on the website this fall if we can get the numbers up enough. We will have to see. And most importantly, we'll have to figure out how to ask groundhogs to not come through here, because I just see periodically everything laid on its side because a nice furry bowling ball has rolled through the garden. So that's that for now. Thanks for your patience on waiting for some more videos to come through. We'll do some updates on our garlic patches. We're going to be working on those today, sharing some notes on some experiments in the chicken yard to grow more fodder for them in the actual yard, and lots more. Hope you all are thriving out there. In the comments, share some notes with each other. What are you up to? Maybe share some links to photos or video updates of your own gardens so folks in the community can support and encourage each other. Hope you all are thriving out there in this wild, crazy moment in the world we are in. Take care.